they're not doing well online. They just don't do well online. And they don't want to send them back to school in a mask and not touch each other and not act like children. And also they started to see what the school was actually doing with the kids. And they were going, you know, sitting there filling out worksheets all day with no expectations of learning isn't teaching, it's testing. So I really felt led to offer this, and we've got a lot of people out of state, and I evaluate people from all over the world actually because of Facebook, and I can do that. And so giving you the tools to evaluate a child, what the issues are, how to address those issues, and I'm going to give you lots of free stuff. What I do is I do a neurodevelopmental evaluation. I look at how the brain is intaking, processing, and I'll go into detail with that. And based on that, I design, or I interview the parents and I see what your concerns are and how much time you have each day. This is when I do an individual evaluation. And then I design a program and teach the parents to do it at home with their child. And then we update the program every 3 or 4 months. And so I've done this for 35 years. And these are tools you can have. So my goal today is to give you some tools to do your own evaluation on your own child. Okay, so you can make those judgments yourself. And then give you some pieces and tools to help you overcome developmental issues, become neurologically organized, improve processing, and then how to teach specific math and reading. And I stated, I am not a curriculum person, I'm a skills person. And if the skill levels are high with the kids, then teaching is easy. If the skill levels aren't there, you can throw any curriculum at them you want, and it's just not going to work very well, or it's going to be frustrating. So, so I want to give you the tools to help your children with their, improve their skills. And so, you know, I work from babies up to, the oldest child I worked with was 92. And very, very few babies come to me except the ones with Down syndrome because the parents know they're going to have problems. And the babies I work with, I love to see the babies come in, because if you start out with a proper neurodevelopmental program, our kids with Down syndrome are usually reading by the age of 3. All right, so those are the types of things we can do if we honor the way the system is designed by God to develop in a hierarchical fashion. And so anyway, that's my goal here today, is to give you some tools to help you look at developmentally what's going on with the child and so forth. We're going to kind of divide it up into sections and take short breaks in between. So if you want to ask questions, I recommend you write them down and then wait to the end of the session, because they're videoing it, and the video has been requested by people from everywhere. So if you wait till the end to ask your questions, and then I can repeat the questions and the people can hear what's going on. Okay? You ready? That's my kid. That's my format. How many of you are in touch with me on Facebook besides? Okay. These are my grandchildren. Aren't they beautiful? And that's my front yard. All right. I had to relearn how to do PowerPoint. I'm not very good at this. All right. The basic principles of what I do, my original degree is chemical engineering. And because God has a sense of humor. I started out chemical engineers or systems engineers. So I used to have my own engineering business and so forth. Then I had this kid, which I had no idea what to do with. So, and I was wandering around Goodwill looking at the books, because that's what you do at Goodwill, right? You buy the books. And so I came across a little book called How to Teach Your Baby to Read by Glenn Doman. My son was 10, 11 months old. And so I read the book and I said, this is pretty cool. And I called Philadelphia, where the Institutes for Achievement of Human Potential is, and said, can I come up here and just, because they work mainly with brain injured children. And I said, can I come up and just, hang out and watch what you do? And they said, we have classes. Classes, okay. So I was on a plane to Philadelphia. And that was the downhill slide into putting me into the neurodevelopmental work. And since then, I've studied with the institutes in Philadelphia, Glenn Doman, Carl Delicato, Temple Fay, all those guys. And then I worked with the National Academy for Child Development for 12 years, Bob Doman, which is the nephew of Glenn Doman. And then in 1999, the Christians split off and formed ICANN, International Christian Association of Neurodevelopmentalists, to get away from some of the New Age stuff they were doing and so forth. So yeah, since 1985, I've pretty much been involved with the neurodevelopmental work. Given that, my son was reading at college level by 7, okay? And because I could see the principles involved with neurodevelopmental, which is this, okay? There's two main things that are absolutely verified scientifically, is that neuroplasticity. The brain is changeable by specific stimulation. The central nervous system is changeable if you stimulate it in a certain way. You can grow new neurons, you can rewire the system. There's absolutely no doubt that this is the case, all right? And so even Stanford University's website, when it talks about working with brain injury, absolutely verifies the neuroplasticity principle. And then the concept of hierarchical development. The brain, when a newborn baby is born, it doesn't have the brain wired up. But the brain wires up in a hierarchical way, and I'll show you some of that information of how it does. And so if you go through the proper developmental steps, you have a well-organized brain. If you don't go through the proper developmental steps, you have a disorganized brain, or if injury, illness, something else interferes with that, you can wind up with some disorganization or dysfunction. But the fact is, I don't believe in IQs, okay? They're changeable. We see them change all the time. Unfortunately, the school system does. How many of your kids have been tested by the school system and given a number? And so the whole system is plastic and changeable, and how you evaluate it and how you look at it is totally how effective you're going to be. In engineering, the efficacy of your program depends on how good your model is. If you don't have a good model, you don't have a good way to address issues. If you have a good model, you can effectively intervene and do that. So this is a much more effective. And the fact is, none of the things I'm going to tell you are new. This stuff has been known. They started the work back in the 1940s with Dr. Temple Fay, who was a neurologist out of the Philadelphia area. And Then they were working with brain injured children and showing that, well, first of all, they had the developmental profile, and I'll show you that, but showing that you could intervene and actually effectively help them. And then came the work of Dr. Carl Delicato back in 1959. He wrote his first book on overcoming learning disabilities. It's how you can reorganize the system and get rid of dyslexia and things like that. So this stuff is not new. Back in the 70s, the parents in Philadelphia got together. Well, they had a school for TMR kids, trainable mentally retarded kids, right? And the people from the institutes got involved and started teaching the kids to read and do math and do all this stuff. So they went to the Pennsylvania legislature and they wanted free and appropriate education, right? Well, they got free and appropriate education, but they didn't get the methodologies. And then it became nationwide. So now, today, we're in a situation we have free and appropriate education. What's appropriate education? Appropriate education today keeps them with the label. Doesn't help you overcome the label. And so the school system gets money for every labeled child. So they're in any incentive to incorporate the methodologies to help overcome the learning problems. When the parents were talking to me, you know, they don't have school, so they don't have speech therapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy. They don't have access to the therapies if their kids aren't in school, unless it's online. I think some are doing online, are they? And the neurodevelopmental model actually incorporates all those things into, because of the people that input information. So we look at the brain as a whole system, and I'll show you that. So you can get pieces of OT, PT, ST, BT, VT with our programs. So I'll be giving you some of those pieces for that. We've studied not just the neurodevelopmental, but people all over the country that have been involved in the work. We studied, hi guys, go ahead and sign in. We've studied oral motor therapy with Sarah Rosenfeld Johnson, who's the best oral motor therapist in the world. We studied with all the different reflex integration people, rhythmic movement, Svetlana Moskotova, I love my Russian friends, and the Goddards out of England. We've studied with them. We studied sound therapy with Ingo Steinbach out of Germany. So we tried to collect pieces of all the areas. For instance, sensory integration grew out of the neurodevelopmental work, because Jean Ayres, the grandmother of sensory integration, actually studied the neurodevelopmental model, and her developmental profile looks very similar to ours. So anyway, you get pieces of all those things when you look at the neurodevelopmental model here. This is when we studied with Anat Baniel. There was an interesting, and you have these in your handouts. You have all of these in your thing. This is just something. Have you heard of Anat Baniel? She does ABM. She does her own thing. These are just some principles to pay attention to that helps improve neuroplasticity, changes to the brain. And if you want to change, I just put in these 2 pages because I thought these were interesting, interesting pieces to have as far as that's concerned. So when you're working with a child, you want to keep these pieces in mind. And so often, when I'm working with a family, they'll say, I taught it to him yesterday and today he doesn't know it, you know, or I taught it to him last month and he could do it and today he doesn't know it. And I'm going, input it again, okay, input it again. If it's not there, input it again. So anyway, that's some of the things we need to do. What does it mean to be neurologically organized? That means you receive information from your sensory system, that you process it in short-term memory, short-term and working memory, and I'll talk about all of these, that you store it in the brain in an organized way, that your brain can access that information, and you can output it in an organized way. So if there is a missing wire in the way you receive, process, store, or output that information, for instance, dyslexia, you know what dyslexia just means you can't read as well as your IQ indicates you should be able to. Reversals is often a big piece of that. It's going into the brain, it's having to cross the corpus callosum, it comes out backwards, you know, that type of thing. So that it's going in, but it's not in a way that you can access in an organized way. So I'll talk about that in detail. So that's the organization of the central nervous system. Now this is our model. Can you read this, or you can look at it on your paper? This is what I use when I'm evaluating a child. And the way this works is you can see the inputs to the major inputs to the brain, the visual, the auditory, and the tactile system. How you see, how you hear, and how you feel, how your body feels, all right? And the major motor outputs is the mobility, gross motor, speech and language, and manual function, fine motor function. And the way this works is this is down here at level 1, this is a newborn baby, right here. And this is also the pons medulla level of the brain, the very newborn baby active part of the brain. And then level 2, we start to get up into the higher level of the brain as the baby wires up more. Then we have, this is the midbrain here. And then we get up into the precortex of the brain. And we get up into the cortex of the brain. The cortex is the highest level where we read, speak, and all that. So, if you learn this, every baby you have from now on, don't give me that look. Every baby you have from now on, you know how to create an environment. I'm also a trained Montessori teacher, so I love Montessori stuff, you know, the prepared environment and all that. You know how to arrange the environment for the baby to go through the developmental steps in an organized way. So in the newborn baby, they have a pupillary response to light. So when I'm evaluating a child, do you like my new pens? Aren't they cool? I usually shine a light right at the pupil and see how they're responding to light. I also find sometimes the kid's eyes are shut down. The pupil is very retracted. That usually means they're toxic in some way. Sometimes they have a really slow response to light, which means there's allergens usually, something metabolic going on. So I do check the pupil response to light. And then with the next step up from the newborn baby is horizontal tracking. If you see babies, they'll be on their tummy and they'll start to watch you as you move across the room, and the eyes can start to track horizontally. The brain wires up that lowest level and they track horizontally. And then the So when people bring babies to church, I'm always, see, do we have horizontal tracking? And then the next level up is the vertical tracking, Can they move their eyes that way? And then the next level up is the ability to converge the eyes. The eyes can go in and out smoothly and converge smoothly. And I do check that with all the children. So it's important for you to look at that with your children, because if I have an adult that can read and doesn't like to read, there's usually something going on with the tracking and convergence. So starting at 18 inches from the bridge of the nose, I slowly, is that 18 inches? From the bridge of the nose, I slowly bring it into 2.5 inches. And I watch the eyes. Doesn't I go out or in? Do any of y'all's kids have convergence problems? The eyes go in or they go out when you come in? And then they go out, and then they contract smoothly, horizontally. And I hold the chin so they're just moving their eyes vertically. And you'll find often there's some problems, especially if the kids have trouble reading. And so we do provide vision therapy as part of our programs. If your child does have a convergence and tracking problems, it's best to bring him in for us to see, because a vision therapist will charge you $6,000 to $7,000. We include it as part of our programs. And we've trained with vision therapists around the world, and we find it very effective, the things that we can do to help with that. So check that with your children. Go in and out, up and down, side to side. There's also, we see this in autism, and I've seen it with sensory integration issues. I've seen it with some of our kids with Down syndrome, is that, do you kids do sensory play, stimming, flapping in the peripheral vision? All right. Dr. Carl Delicado wrote the first book on the neurodevelopmental approach to autism. It's called The Ultimate Stranger. And he investigated the sensory system. A lot of kids with Down syndrome have autism also. I think it's 1 in 9, something like that, whatever. So you have to watch for what we call stemming sensory play. We're playing with sensory channels repetitively because the kids retract from us and play in that sensory field, and it causes regressions. So I also shine the light right at the pupil of the eye. Let me see if I have. I don't want orange. How does this work? When I'm looking at the eyeball, here's the pupil. I shine the light right at the pupil and have them look at it, and the light should reflect right off the center of the pupil, okay? If it's off center, like over here, that means on the back of the retina is called the macula. The macula is the part of the eye that sees detail. It's where the cones and the rods are. And if that's not completely developed, then you get this reflection off center. So do take a look at that with your child. I cover one eye and I shine the light right at the eye, and then I do the other eye this way. So take a look at that. One of the characteristics you'll see of this is the child will read and miss letters, okay? They won't see certain letters, or, skipping words. Skipping words could either be a tracking problem or it could be a macular problem. And we do have ways of working with increasing this macular function. When the child is doing visual sensory play, stimming, looking at things sideways, flapping things in their peripheral vision, they're using their peripheral vision and not using their central detail vision. You also see the kids with no eye contact, okay? Or low eye contact. You'll see this also. So we have ways of strengthening that central detail vision also. And we have exercises, but I can't give you those generally because if you do the wrong exercises, you can make the eyes worse. So this is something, if you have a tracking and conversions problem, it's something I do need to see the child individually with. But you need to be aware of it, okay? So that's another way I check the child, and you can see it as you go up the developmental profile and vision. Now here we are at the midbrain level, and I'm going to show you a picture of the brain a little bit. How many of you read Glenn Doman's book, How to Teach Your Baby to Read? Nobody good. Sweet Uncle Glenn. I studied under him. But if you've seen the picture with the people with the big red words showing it to babies, like this, it's totally contrary to the developmental profile. The developmental profile shows that you learn to identify pictures first, and then you introduce words, all right? He has them at 2 months old showing big red words. Well, first of all, if I have a big red word here I'm showing to you, you can't see it as a piece. It exceeds the macular function of your eye. So you need to develop that vision to the point where you can see more detail before introducing words. So we don't have any problem with teaching kids to read if we follow the steps properly and don't start introducing words at 2 months old. Ba, 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 ba. So anyway, and then you're up here. Okay. This says laterality noted. Okay. You know that laterality is you're either left-handed or right-handed, right? Left-handed or right-handed. If you're right-handed, you should be right-eyed, right-eared, and right-footed. Left-handed, you should be left-eyed, left-eared, and left-footed. If you're mixed up, you're going to be mixed up. All right? That's what Dave was talking about. He switched hand at 56, I think he said. It's also, if you're using the wrong hand that you're genetically designed to use, it causes big emotional problems. All the bipolar people we evaluated are mixed-handed or using their wrong dominant hand, according to our evaluation of how their brain should be working. Just think about it. If you have two hemispheres of the cortex, one is your emotional and one is your logic. If you don't have those well divided, you don't have logical control of your emotions. So these people swing from emotion to emotion, that type of thing. So you need to do that. Let's go back to auditory input. You know, with a newborn baby, they startle each time. I think I remember that. It's been a long time. And then the next level is the ability to react to threatening sounds. In other words, they startle and then they realize, oh, I've heard that before, I don't have to startle each time. And then they make the meaningful change in tonality. They start to respond to your voice and they can hear the difference, nuances, and so forth. 2 words, 25 words, abstract language, and then up to we call it the 2nd grade level of laterality noted. They should have a dominant ear at that point, so a well-established language center in the brain that they know what's going on. Okay, tactility. When a lot of kids have tactility issues, and when I'm evaluating a child, I first check the Babinski response. If you run your finger up the foot from the heel to the toes, with a newborn baby, the toes go up and spread, and after a couple months they should come down and and curl like this. I find lots of children with unintegrated Babinski reflex, and especially in Down syndrome. The flat feet, the flappy toes, the walk, okay, that's something I work with all the time. And when I studied with Svetlana Moskotova, who's the MNRI, the reflex integration, she actually went around to birthing centers and watched ultrasounds of babies in the womb and saw the movements they make, and she's just simply brilliant. She's really brilliant. And she's put together a wonderful system. I remember sitting in her training class going, oh, that's why our kids with Down syndrome do that. That's why our kids with Down syndrome do that, you know? So we brought that work into our evaluation, and it's been really, really helpful at getting a normal walk. If your Babinski reflex isn't integrated, when you walk, you don't curl your toes. You also have flat feet. How many have flat feet? Pronated ankles is another problem. And so once we integrate that Babinski, and also the other one is a leg flexion reflex, that you actually lift your leg when you walk instead of a hip swing walk. So I see that in almost consistently with my kids with Down syndrome, and I see that with lots of other kids too that miss developmental steps along the way. My son had a hip swing walk because I put him in a walker the first years of his life. I didn't know this stuff until after he was almost a year old. So he had a hip swing, he wouldn't run, and after working on it with a new system, jumping on the mattress, he was running within 10 days. So we got rid of that hip swing walk. And he was considered neurotypical, so. But he was my kid, you know, so he had to have problems. All right, so tactility. I check the Babinski, and there's three types of tactility sensors I look at. There's the deep sensors down next to the bone. We're responsible for pain response, muscle tone, okay, and mobility. If those sensors are low, if the muscle tone is low, you can hyperextend joints, this type of thing. Muscle tone is neurological. If you have low muscle tone, the brain isn't getting the message, I'm exercising this muscle, you need to build. Okay, you need to strengthen. So we stimulate in a certain way and I've got a handout on that, how to do that for you, in a certain way to help improve the signal to the brain so we can improve muscle tone. I do this with kids with brain injury, with cerebral palsy, with Down syndrome. A lot of my LD kids have these issues and so forth. Okay, that's one type of tactility sensor. The other is the Gnostic, the light touch. How many kids can't stand tags in your clothes and or they're always handling things or sensory seeking? Oh, if the deep pressure, deep sensation is low, how many of the kids just bang into things and never feel it, and they're always charging into people and all this type of stuff? Or they get right in their face and they don't have any sense of boundaries, you know? I've seen those things resolved when you do the tactile sequence, and I'll show you how to do that. Throw themselves off the back of your couch. Okay. How many of your kids? Okay, so any of these senses can be hyper, too sensitive, or hypo, not sensitive enough. The deep sensation can be hypo, low tone, or it can be hyper. I've had kids where I grab them here and they just flip out and start laughing, which is an odd response. They start laughing, it tickles them instead of hurting. So when you have an odd response like that, or the kids with cerebral palsy that have high tone, they're very rigid, they're very high tone. So it can be hyper or hypo. the Gnostic, the light touch, can be hyper or hypo. It can be too touchy. The kids won't, in their mouth, they won't eat certain foods because the textures. They're too touchy on their skin. They can only wear sweatpants, you know. They can't wear a belt. All those type of things. That's hyper. And then hypo is they can scratch themselves. Nail biting is a tactility issue, like this. Skin picking, that type of thing, is a tactility issue. So we, whether it's hyper or hypo, we treat it the same way to help resolve it. We stimulate it a specific way and we can help resolve that. And then the other type of tactility sensor is hot and cold. And some of our kids with autism, they can put their hand on a hot stove and burn their skin and not feel it. And and then some, like my son, thought a warm bathtub was hot. He was afraid of the water. So it can be, again, it can be hyper or hypo. So we look at and evaluate, and I get the input from the parents of all those things. So you need to note that about your child, you know, if they have any of these issues. Okay. Mobility, those are the sensory inputs that I look at. And the mobility outputs is the newborn baby is flapping their arms and legs and they just randomly move, okay. All right, now we get into the important stuff. Cross-pattern crawl. A newborn baby, you put them on their tummy and they should start to work into a cross-pattern tummy crawl. This is a step that's often missed. We put the kids in buckets. We put them in things, you know, their seats, slings, Johnny jump ups and all this stuff. They need to be on the floor, on their tummy, crawling to organize the lowest level of the brains. And I'll show you a picture of that in a minute, why that's the case. And notice that's where the eyes start to learn to track horizontally. This is the pons level of the brain. This is where sensory integration takes place, at the very lowest level of the brain. And then, once you're up to level 3, this is the midbrain level. And this is where the child is up on their hands and knees. And you've seen them go up and down like this, like they're looking at, their eyes are learning to converge. The brain is training the eyes to work together, okay? And that's the level at which that takes place. So what is a cross pattern? Cross pattern is, you've seen a lizard crawling up a screen. Cross pattern is this, all right? So they should work into that. With a newborn, with a little baby, they usually crawl backwards first, and then they start to move forward, maybe homolateral, maybe homologous froggy style, and eventually it should work into a cross pattern, all right? I'll show you why that's important in a minute, that it does work into cross pattern. And then they get up on their hands and knees, and again, that should work into a cross pattern. But also when they're doing this crawling and creeping, they should also be pushing with their toes. Pushing with their toes actually builds arches. It integrates the Babinski reflex. And that's another thing I need to tell you. Today, all the rage is reflex integration. Are you hearing about that in the therapy world? Lots of people out there peddling reflex integration. If you go through the normal neurodevelopmental steps, reflexes get integrated, all right? God didn't make mistakes. He gave us a way to integrate these things without specific intervention. Now, with some of the kids with genetic issues or with injuries, we have to go back and look at and integrate some reflexes, which I'm glad we have that tool. But for your neurotypical kids, if you go through the developmental steps, you integrate reflexes. So instead of, I know how to integrate reflexes, but instead of going straight to that, I make sure the kids go through all these developmental steps first and see how far that gets us. So I've given you that in a handout, the things to look for to go through that. So then we get up, the kids, you know, starts cruising and walking, and then it goes up here and eventually develops, you know, a dominant foot and so forth. So I've got the paper on the types of things you can do with your child on that. And the speech and language, the birth cry present, consistent vital cry in response to threatening sounds. I'm sure you've seen that. Meaningful in gold, erected tonality, 2 words, 25 words, sentences, and so forth. And for manual function or fine motor, you know, when the newborn baby, they grab something and they won't let hold, especially your hair, right? They do that. So it's the grasp, and they have to learn to release it is the next step. All right, so we do this, when I'm working with babies, we do all these things. How many of you are working with fine motor issues with your kids? No, yes, no, okay. I don't know your issues. You were late. You didn't get on the issues. Prehensile grasp. So the baby learns to grasp and then learns to release. Okay, so when I'm working with a baby, I put things in their hands on purpose and then take it out. Put it in, take it out, and they learn to grasp, release, grasp, release. They also, this is a cool thing, in the reflex integration world, how many of you, my son didn't do this. When you fall down, you reflexively put your hands out. It's called the hands catching reflex. My kid used to face plant, all right? I didn't know about it in those days. So we actually do take the kid and aim them towards the tabletop and put their hands out so they start to catch their hands this way, all right? I mean, that's cool that we can do that. And so, and the first thing, when your child is learning to do stuff, they fist everything, they grab it, you know, like this, and eat like that. And then they start to pick up the organic Cheerios. We do organic Cheerios, don't we? We don't want to eat Roundup, do we? Okay, organic Cheerios, do it that way. Finger thumb opposition, learning to do that, and so forth, and on up. And then handedness should develop as you do the cross pattern things, creep, crawl, the brain organizes, and then you should develop a dominant hand with that. There's lots of hand reflexes and lots of fine motor things that lots of kids have trouble with because they don't do things they used to do. We used to do monkey bars. We used to climb trees. We used to go outside. You don't develop good hand reflexes doing this all day. So, and good fine motor stuff. I'm very anti-screens, by the way, so in case I don't want to let that go by. They have baby carriages with iPads on them now. Anyway. Okay, so if you learn this and you take a look at that, and I'll be glad to answer questions later, you will see, you'll be ahead of most of the population of knowing the steps that your child should be in, and also identifying those different areas where you can intervene and work on that. I threw this in here. You have that. Here's your brain, kind of sliced up. Everybody asks me, I want the kids doing cross pattern creep and crawl. And that seems stupid for somebody with learning disabilities, right? What does that have to do with learning? Well, the cortex is where your learning sits, right? Up here, the top part of your brain. But the sensory input to your brains takes place at the motor centers, the crawling and creeping levels. So it comes over and crosses and goes and organizes the cortex at the very lowest levels of the brain. If you don't have this level organized, the signals can go up here, it can go down here, it can go over here, it can go to Hawaii. You never know where it's going to go. So that's why we work on the lower centers of the brain, the crawling, the creeping, and get those organized. And then the brain's like a funnel. You've got to organize the lowest level, and then it grows into a well-organized cortex. Okay? Does that make sense? All right. Okay, so are there any questions about this part? Because we're going to move into processing in a minute. Here. Any questions about this? There's a reason I'm going through all this. Okay, let's take a break for a couple of minutes and then we'll drink some wine. And, it's too early for wine. She's hardcore. She's really hardcore.
I'm a big wino. I found a wine that I had to buy every bottle, so that was in the store at the time. Toe walking with autistic.
Yeah, well, toe walking in a sensory.
Okay, so that's what I was going to ask, because I know that you talked about the reflexing, but that's what one of my oldest daughters struggles with.
How old?
4.
Oh. Toe walking has either hypertactility of the foot or the constipation.
Okay.
It's usually resolved with one of those. How many of the kids have constipation? I mean, it's just like, yeah.
Yeah.
Huh?
I guess so, yeah. But she's always, she falls down, but she doesn't realize that she gets hurt unless it's like severe, you know. So that's where
I have things for you to do.
Okay, because we have like when I told you that the meltdowns, but she also has sensory, real bad. Like when you described can't have tags, cannot wear jeans, will not wear jeans because of the feeling in the back and the center. So I'm trying to figure out, you know, when it just clicked for me.
Come here. There's reflexes for the kids that can't stand belts and can't stand to sit in a chair. There's reflexes in the back, and I usually ask them to get on their hands and knees, but I won't humble you that much. There's spinal Perez reflex here, which if that's not integrated, it feels like an electrical shock in the middle of the back. Okay. And I do that with the sensory kids a lot. Okay, so when I rub my finger here, and you go, you know. My son had this. You're not done yet.
Oh, okay.
Too tall. Did you see that? So I just run it here, and if it's not integrated, it feels like electric shock right here. Mm-hmm. All right. And the other one.
What if your kid is seeking that?
You what?
I have twins who have mild cerebral palsy.
Mm-hmm. Who has what?
Mild cerebral palsy.
Oh yeah.
So, but when they're standing or sitting beside me, they want me to just rub my hand down their spine.
They need lots of deep pressure.
That all the time.
Lots of deep pressure with that. Okay.
So is that what
I've got
you're
other
looking
stuff.
for?
That's not the reflex. That's just sensory.
Okay.
The other one is when they're on the hands and knees and we rub. This is spinal galant reflex. And usually the hip will kick out this way or that way. And this is also the squirrely kids, the kids that can't hold still, if this is still active. Mm-hmm. And I find this a lot. So we have ways of integrating that also. So thank you.
No problem.
You do good. What's that wine you have to have every bottle of?
It's a peach wine. It's $3.95.
It's sweet?
Not really. I know. You do? It's good, isn't it?
Do y'all want to get a drink of water or anything?
Oh, I don't want it.
Get a drink of water. You're going to make me keep talking. All right.
It goes out of salt all the time. I have apple, pineapple, and watermelon. Is that the big barley?
Yeah. That's perfect. No, that's about the top.
That's different.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, but
The
you can't
pink one
find
is the
it.
best.
You can't find it anymore.
Have you homeschooled your children, twins?
My twins are the youngest of 8, and I have homeschooled for 34 years.
Wow. What's your name?
Barbara Wood
Good to meet you. Where do you live?
in Decula.
Dacula?
Yeah, Decula, Georgia.
Tequila. That's not very far. Yeah. Okay. All right. If you have a child, okay, after I do the developmental profile and I go through and I look at their dominance, it's important that you check dominance. What is dominance? Which hand is dominant? If you're mixed-handed, you're neurologically disorganized. Don't give me this, you know, whatever. And don't write with both hands in front of Miss K. That makes me crazy. So if you're right-handed, you should be right-eyed, right-eared, and right-footed. If you're left-handed, left-eyed, left-eared, and left-footed. So it's important for you to check that, okay?
I have a question.
Huh?
Are we supposed to say anything or just sit and be quiet?
You what?
Are we supposed to ask questions or are we supposed to sit and be quiet?
The instructions are wait until the end of this session, so because
Okay, I will do that.
we're videoing this,
Oh, okay,
and if the handedness is still mixed after the age of 7, then you need to go back, check the crawling, the creeping, and all that, make sure that gets really done well. But also, I have found over the years, and y'all are all from here except you, cranial work is extremely helpful. And there's not many people that can do a good job with it. If the hand dominance is off, and almost all my kids that I see here, I send them to Dr. Jerry Hockman at Life Chiropractic in Marietta. One appointment and he fixes whatever it is. It's something you should clear, all right? Especially with CP or especially with sensory integration. Well, Dave's son, he was the definition of sensory integration issues. He was just, you saw a picture of a bug, he'd freak out, you know, so allergic to everything. One session with Dr. Hockman, who does SOT, sacral occipital technique, and he teaches at Life Chiropractic. He's 70 years old now. He's retired from private practice, but he still sees my kids. You have to put my name and the email address, because that's their secret code to go see him. And so one adjustment, like one girl walked in left-handed, walked out right-handed. If something is structurally off, the brain will manifest in an odd way. So I always recommend SRT, chiropractic, or cranial osteopath. I don't know who to recommend in Greenville. You can check at sorsi.com. There is a practitioner in North Carolina that I've had good work with from some of the people. sorsi.com is the website. But if you're here, nobody does a better job than Dr. Jerry Hockman, ever, ever, ever. He's magic. He does his own stuff too. I highly recommend that. When and I don't even know what they do, all right? I know that if I send somebody to one appointment and they come out changed with one adjustment, I'm going with that, right? You don't have to go twice a week for the rest of your life, like most chiropractors, and do all these x-rays and all this nonsense stuff. So it's jhockman@life.edu. is his email address. Put my name in the subject line and he'll see you. Otherwise, he doesn't see people. And he's a lot of fun. He's really good with our kids too. I had one little girl who was severely brain injured from an RH incompatibility pregnancy. I mean, she was bleeding from every organ and orifice of her body at birth. She was all puffed up. So she was pretty disabled. And it was a daughter of a friend, and they took her to Hockman. And one adjustment, she started crawling. Okay. Like I said, I don't know. I'm very pragmatic about this. I have no idea what they do. I just, they fix this thing. He puts me back in, I'm old now. I'm 69 and a half. And he has to keep gluing me back together. So, sorsi.com or cranialacademy.org is the osteopath. Now there is a osteopathic school in Buford, but I haven't seen anybody give me the same results that Hockman has. An osteopath is. They have like a med school, but some of them do adjustments, I'll say. So I do recommend you clear every child with cranial work, period. Okay? And Hockman, I like him so much because my parents, I have a parent that comes in from Singapore, goes to see him once and they're done. They can't come in all the time. I have parents come in from Texas that goes to see him. So he's magic. I like magic people. And he gives me results. He gives the parents results. And they can tell the difference. One girl, I just saw her yesterday. She had problems from birth, not vaccinated, but her mom had H1N1 flu when she was pregnant. It's the only thing we can figure out. And she has some kind of seizures. Beautiful, delayed though. But one adjustment, she started echo reading. One adjustment. So you tell me what's going on, I don't know. But structurally, if everything is fixed, the brain works more smoothly with the cerebral spinal fluid flowing over the brain and a nice pulse and so forth. So, and Dr. Hockman loves seeing my kids, so that's good. All right, auditory. All right, so we note the dominance. How do you test eye dominance? You can use whatever. What do they call those things?
Kaleidoscope.
Thank you. You can use a kaleidoscope. You can use a hole in a card and have them look at you through the hole, see which eye it goes to. I usually hold it up to them and say, okay, look at me through that hole and see which eye they go through, and do several tests to see which eye is dominant. For ear dominance, you can use a phone, you can use, check it several times, see which ear they turn to you when you whisper, that type of thing. So you want to check the dominance. And this is especially true with those with learning disabilities. You've got to check the dominance. My dyslexic profile, y'all didn't take a break. Is right-eyed, left-handed. Right-handed, left-eyed. Mixed-handed, mixed-eyed. Mixed hand-eye dominance is usually underlying most, quote, dyslexia. Mixed hand-eye dominance. She's got a very skeptical look. So,
I'm all right. My kids are all right. They all have.
did they crawl and creep?
Mm-hmm. Yes, they did.
I'll check them. Maybe they shouldn't be right.
That's a possibility that I can't answer.
Okay, and footedness. I haven't found footedness to be as important, but that. So if you do all that stuff and you get the dominant squared away, You know, you go a long ways toward having a really efficient system that can take in and output information. All right, the next area is short-term memory. Short-term working memory is you take in information, you hold it, it's like the RAM of your mental computer. You can hold it in short-term memory and then output it. So, and this is our kids with brain injury, with autism, with Down syndrome, often is a problem, and it gets them labeled as low IQ, inability to learn, and so forth and so on. But this is not true. So when I'm asking the parents, I've said, how many steps can the child do? If I say, touch your nose, can they do 1 step? All right. I say, touch your hair and your ears, can they do 2 steps? Touch your tummy, your nose, and your head, can they do 3 steps? A 1-year-old can do 1 step. A 2-year-old can do 2 steps. A 3-year-old, 3, 4-year-old, 4, 5-year-old, 5. When I started in this work, the average adult could do 7. Today it's 5.5. We've lost a 1.5-year developmental mentality in the 35 years I've been doing this work, because we're not an auditory society, we're visual. You know, we're doing this. We used to listen to long sermons, we used to memorize things, we used to read to each other, we used to talk to each other. How odd is that? And we don't do those things anymore. It's pretty funny, because I was working with a family, I knew the family, and they had 5 girls and this 1 boy, poor boy. And I knew at 10 years old he couldn't read, still couldn't read. And they finally brought him into me when he was 12. And he was just very neurologically disorganized. He shouldn't have been able to read at all. He was mixed-handed, mixed-eyed, mixed-eared. They brought him into me because he was uncoordinated. And, but I tested his reading, and he learned to read at 10, he was 12. He tested at 11th grade level reading comprehension. And I just went, wow. How did you do this? He also tested very high on auditory processing. The family is a strong language family. They read great books, they memorize lots of stuff, they whatever. So when this very disorganized kid finally, his brain got the idea of reading, he just exploded, you know. In 2 years he went from 0 to 11th grade level. So don't underestimate the importance of high-level language input. Our forefathers did it, always. They memorized lots of stuff, and we need to go back to those days and turn off the electronics. Okay, go back to language input. So auditory processing is probably the #1 problem in our society today. It makes us a very immature society. We used to listen to long sermons and speeches, political speeches. Today we have bumper sticker brains, okay? We have little tidbits. That's all we can absorb, right? So when I'm testing the kids, usually the parents know how many steps the child can do. If they can do 1 step, 2 step, 3 steps. And did I give you handouts on that? I think I did. So once you find out how many, okay, for the older kids, I test them auditorily. I'll say, repeat. And you want to say things they can't visualize, all right? Because I want them to remember the sounds, not picture it and then read it back off the mental wall. So I'll say, B7, row D. So I mix up Greek letters, numbers, and conceptual words like love, up, from. You can't really visualize, but I can visualize anything. and have them repeat that back. So I'll say them about a second or two apart. 3, L, 9, tau, and repeat that. That would be 4, okay, and 5. So find the baseline that your child is at. Where is their auditory processing? And I think this is a Bob Doman thing out of NACD. He actually was the one that identified and started working with auditory processing. And Dr. Sue Buckley out of England, are you familiar with her work? She has the Down syndrome, something there. She actually did research papers and showed, thank you, somebody published it, that if you practice the auditory sequences, you can improve auditory processing. What's the number one thing they say about Down syndrome? You have low auditory processing, you have to teach everything visually, right? It's not, well, she showed that if you practice them, you can actually improve it. So I want you to test it. Test how many things your child can do and output. Now, when you're testing the kids, and then when you're practicing them, like if you're keeping cards or you're doing whatever, you need to have a lot of them because the kids memorize them. The creepy kids, they just, cheat on everything. So another way to test, I use the memory cards a lot. These little you have the memory game, little picture cards. Some of my kids don't know what that is, so they never ate one. So have the little picture cards and make sure they know what they are. And I don't like that one. So I put several of them down. Some of them don't know what that is either. Some of them, my autistic kids, it's a red apple with a green stem with a worm. They have to give you all the details of it. So crayons. So I put them down. Put several pictures down, and make sure they know what they're called. And then I cover them. And I say, okay, give me banana, apple, rocket, or touch it. Okay. They can't be looking at it when you say it. It becomes visual. And have them touch it. That's another way you can practice or do these type of things. So the little cards are handy to help do those kind of activities. Does that make sense? I think, isn't there a handout on that? Auditory processing activities. I think I gave you, auditory touch sequence. And auditory object sequence. So it doesn't matter what it is. It could be all different kinds of things. It could be a treasure hunt. Okay, go find blah, blah, blah. 3, 4, 5 things. And mix it up. You could do the shopping game. I went to the store and I bought, elephant, tree, banana, apple, that type of thing. Or I packed my bags and I put in shirt, shorts, shoes, socks, and a little alliteration along with it. Does that make sense? You got it? Okay. Practice these. Now, if you want your child to have an independent life, they have to be 6 or better. Got it? There's adults running around out there with a 5.5, so watch out for them. Beware. And also test them before you get married. And if you're already married, you can work on it. Right? Okay. So does that make sense? It doesn't. There's different. I have on my website, kness.com, I've got articles on hearing, listening, learning, you know, things like that. But this, two of my colleagues worked at a ranch in Arizona for mentally disabled adults. And they were training a gal out there to do this work with these adults. They're called ranchers. And they had all kinds of jobs and things for them out there. And this one woman rancher was 43 years old, and she had a processing of 1. She could only process like a 1-year-old. So they worked with her. Oh, and they had a shop there where they made stepping stones, all right? And she would make 1 a year. And they worked with her on their processing, and they got it up to 3. And she just started becoming productive. She had her own show of stepping stones, okay? She started making all this stuff. She finally got a life. So if your mental RAM is low, you can be intelligent, and I absolutely believe that. We're intelligent because of the image of God in each and every individual. It is there. Whether you have Down syndrome, whether you have a brain injury, whatever, it is there. But if you can't access it, you can't use it. And I've seen this so many times with our kids with severe brain injury. We're inputting all this information, they can't respond, they can't do anything, right? Later on, it all comes out. You know, it all comes out. All that stuff we were putting into them, they were getting it. It was going into their brain. And that's, you know, that's the gift from God. It really is. Work on processing. It's got to be up there. Now, my goal for my kids that I work with here is 8 to 12. And when my son was in high school, I had to borrow kids because he was a singleton. And I borrowed kids from our church school. And they worked with each other, and they got up to 8s, 12s, 14s, 16s, you know. You know how competitive boys are, you know. So when they're working with each other, they were doing that. So work on the processing. Okay, you have to remember, each digit increase is a developmental year. So be intense, be positive, be rewarding, be patient. It's not going to change in a month, okay? You need to just really continually work on it. All right, so there's different handouts, there's different articles on my website on processing. The work of Sue Buckley, she has some materials to do that. If you're not familiar with Sue Buckley, she's on Facebook. You can look her up. But she's done some really good work. She's also in favor of sight reading, which is what we teach our kids to do, which helps improve language and speech and all that stuff, so I love her. She's actually published papers and stuff we've been doing for decades, and now it's valid. So, okay, for visual digit spans, I don't work on this as often, but it's a real good indicator. This is my test book. So I hold the numbers up for 3 seconds and have them repeat it back one number at a time. 146, okay? If they say 146, I hit them on the head with the book. So you can do 3s, 4s, hold it up for 3 seconds. And, you know, a lot of my kids with learning disabilities, they'll get them out of order. And if I have them actually touch each one, not say it, but touch it, they can see them in order. That's when I know we need to work on the eye dominance and all that. 5, hold it up for 3 seconds, take it away. And this is something else you can work on, because if you can take in a lot of visual information and hold it in short-term working memory and manipulate it, it does help with your intellectual function. You can go up to higher numbers. Now, when they were working with each other, they got up to really high numbers too, when the boys were working with each other. They go higher than this too. They got, I think one got 18, something like that. So where's my cards? When we use very high-tech equipment here, and so you can just find out where your child is and make cards like here. But do make a whole bunch of them, because the kids do memorize them. I had one little boy come in, he tested it, 3 or 4 the first time I saw him. He came back in 3 months and said, I can do 9 now. In 3 or 4 months, no. I said, you memorized your cards, didn't you? And he said, so. So you want to work on that processing. Okay. All right. To improve auditory, go away and don't come back. Thank you. To improve auditory, practicing the sequences. I mean, you know, our goal for our kids is to be able to live independently. And being able to process and hold in short-term memory is extremely important to that goal. Extremely important. Lots of auditory input, like the story I told you. Now, don't read to your kid stuff they can read for themselves. Always read above their head and beyond their interest, so you're continually expanding their language and the things they're interested in. Don't stay forever on Captain Underpants or whatever kids are doing today. I'm just cringe. Lots of auditory input. Did I put the 1,000 good books list in here? Already. Yeah. All right. I'll show you that later. 1,000 good books. I like having my computer because I have a website brain, so I just remember where websites are. So, narration, lots of auditory input, high-level language, reading to your child, listening to books, recordings. And I usually, with the older kids, when dominance is, we're working on establishing dominance, make sure it goes into the dominant ear, the language, not music, language only. So lots of language input. Narration, you know what narration is? Charlotte Mason fans around here. Narration is when you're reading it to your child, you stop and say, what did I say? Or what did it say? Summarize. You want a summary of it. Charlotte Mason is big into this, and I recommend her work highly. She invented the word twaddle. You know what twaddle means? Twaddle. Yeah, it's kind of like mental junk. Don't expose your kids to twaddle. Isn't that a great word? Twaddle. That's your word for the day, twaddle. Okay, narration, memory work. Memorizing things. Children can memorize stuff. We can't. Children are designed by God to absorb information from the environment and store it. I remember a song when I was in 3rd grade. Shina na yoro, shina na yoro ko minatono akari no saki. I have no idea what it means, but it's a Japanese song I learned when I was in 3rd grade. Yeah, and it's still there. So our kids can memorize things well, and so utilize that. All right. So much of education today is against memory work. But it does help improve auditory processing. It really does. And our forefathers could memorize, they used to quote bags of scripture, and poems and speeches, great speeches. They could quote these things, and Shakespeare and so forth. And we can't do that today. And practicing the visual sequences. So you have a picture as a card there, how to do that. All right. Okay. Are there any questions? You were going to ask a question about something that I rudely interrupted.
I forgot.
Did you forget? Okay. Any questions at this point? No? Okay. So your twins with CP, functionally, where are they? How old are they? Oh, you said they were adults.
They turned 18 on Tuesday. And like what level do they read, or what do
Yeah. Walking, talking, reading.
Yeah, they read at maybe a 4th grade level. They have been tested with IQs of about 57. But their therapists, they've been in therapy for a long time, and they think that that's too low for what they do.
Yes. IQ test is how well you do on a test, period. Doesn't have anything to do with how smart you are. Yeah.
I remember my question.
Just to write it down. Your question is?
How do you determine what should be dominance if they have, due to the cerebral palsy, a left-sided weakness, but you suspect that they should have been left-handed, but they used the right hand because it was easier because due to the muscular weakness?
That's a big problem. So you need to get them on program. Functionally, can they walk, talk, all that?
Yes.
Okay. Well, do lots of deep pressure, do lots of creeping, crawling, get it organized, go see Dr. Hockman. And let's see what we can do. Now, I had one little girl in program. She had, it's some kind of thing in utero where something wraps around a limb and it doesn't grow. I forgot what it's called. So she didn't even have a hand, which should have been dominant. That was the problem. So, yeah.
So what did you do? What did they do?
We had to go the other way. We didn't have any choice. Girls it isn't as bad as boys. Boys' brains are more lateralized. If you look at the hemispheres of the brain, they're very lateralized. One hemisphere does this, one hemisphere does that. The only communication between the two hemispheres is called the corpus callosum. And it's much smaller in males than females. So the male brain is much more lateralized than the female brain. That's why more males get learning disabilities and things like this. James Dobson said males are brain injured. No, okay. Because the female hormones actually cut down on the corpus callosum during pregnancy. So, you've got to have that brain well lateralized in order to do that. So, go see Hockman and see what he says. Okay. Or just get adjusted. I don't know what he does. He says, C1, yeah, he's got a code. I have no idea what it is. So, anyway. Okay. So both twins have, with CP, have a weakness on one side or the other?
Left side. Left side.
Both on the left side. Are they identical?
Yes.
How did that happen?
God.
Are you sure they're identical? Usually identical twins are mirror images of each other. All right, this is another trick, and only I know this because, well, I told other people. Back many years ago, I had a friend with 5 boys, and the 2 youngest were very autistic. And they were on program a long time, and they were pretty recovered, except Seth. Seth kept regressing. So she flew in from Southern California, and that's when we used to let people in California into Georgia. And she stayed with me for a week and went down to Dr. Bergeron in Roswell, who's an alternative MD, just to check everything out. And hair swirls. Hair swirls. If you look at the back of somebody's head and see the hair swirl. Now, I learned this from a hairdresser. Hairdresser taught us this, that if you're right-handed, the hair swirls clockwise. If you're left-handed, it goes counterclockwise. If you have dual opposing hair swirls, you're dyslexic. Seth had 3, dual opposing and 1 up here. So while he was down at Dr. Bergeron's office, there was a chiropractor that worked in his office that found that one of those skull plates, the skull plates of your head breathe, they move, okay, with the cerebral spinal fluid. He found that one of them was fixed, it wasn't moving. And he took his hammer thing, bah, 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 and loosened it up. And while we're standing there, Seth's 3 hair swirls went to 1. So I go, hair swirls can move. And he was clear. Seth was clear. So we had this thing. Hair swirls can indicate something's going on in the brain and which way it should be manifested, and they can change. So who can do this? How do we use this information? Well, since then, I've seen several people. I always check the hair swirls, check the back of their head. I sit in church and look at the back of people's heads and see which way their hair swirls. And I said, "Oh, are you left-handed? Yeah, how'd you know?" Never mind. Oh, are you dyslexic? No. And so over time, we've found certain cranial osteopaths. Dr. Hockman, the gal in sorsi.com, the gal Boccaccio or something like that. She's got an Italian name. One boy I was seeing in North Carolina had double opposing hair swirls. He was adopted, so we didn't know his genetics, what his parents and grandparents, because I look at that too. What are your genetics? Everybody's right-handed, but Uncle George is a little schizophrenic. Maybe he should have been left-handed. But so this kid had a double opposing hair swirls, was very dyslexic, and I didn't know which hand to manifest. I also look at the feet. The dominant, if you're right-handed, your left foot should be bigger. If you're left-handed, your right foot should be bigger. Except in Down syndrome, it doesn't work. Congratulations. And so this kid, the dad cut his hair Sunday, went to see the chiropractor Monday, cut his hair Sunday, he had 2 double opposing hair swirls. Went to see the chiropractor, Boccaccio or whatever her name is, in North Carolina. Monday, he came to see me Tuesday, he had 1 hair swirl. So he had moved the hair swirls with 1 adjustment. Isn't that cool? Now, I told Dr. Hockman this, and he thinks I'm totally out of my tree. And I said to him, he teaches at Life Chiropractic, the college in Marietta. I said, you have Nobel Prize winning information free here. I'm telling you, there's something to this. And you have all these acolytes that you could write a paper and do studies with. He just makes fun of me. So anyway, that's one of our things. So hair swirls. Another thing I do with looking at which hand should be dominant is I have the kids put their hands flat on the table, and I put my hand over theirs and have them push my fingers open. Okay? They're pushing here. Now I'm not watching this hand, I'm watching the other hand. How much spillage goes on, how much movement in the other hand when they're working this hand, okay? Because the most mature pathway will have the least movement from the other hand. Does that make sense? So if I'm doing this hand and this hand's having a fit, and I do this hand and this hand's steady, then this is the dominant hand, okay? This is a more mature pathway. So that's another way I test. I also do a tracing test and see which hand they can write with. If you can write with both hands, you know, which, when you're doing finger opposition, which hand do you look at? Do you have to pay attention to? So I do lots of different tests when I'm looking at hand dominance. But when you have a physical issue, it makes it more difficult. So anyway. Yeah, usually identical twins are mirror images, one's left and one's right. Yeah, I just did that with some twins in Florida. They were very dyslexic. I mean, they couldn't learn to read anything. Lots of visual issues. So, but praise God, they just tested over 10th grade reading comprehension level. So we did get them up. So, any question? Okay, you guys. You're being too easy on me. All right, let's go eat some lunch.